All right. Today I'm joined by Adam Poe, a senior marketing and brand leader whose career spans some of the most recognizable names in sports and tech and consumer goods, including Microsoft, Xbox, Nike. Thanks so much for joining me today.
So happy to be here. Thanks for reaching out and excited to dive right in. This should be fun.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely hop right into it. You obviously have a ton of great experience across a wide variety of very large brands, but just looking throughout your experience and all those brands you work with, what do you think stands out as like the biggest common thread of like what a good client relationship looks like from an agency's perspective?
Sure, it's a great question. For me, this answer is a simple answer, but it's the hardest thing in the world, and I'm sure you've heard this before. Is just trust. Like all the great relationships that I've had are started business relationships that turn into personal relationships over time are built on trust, right? The trust between the agency and the brand that we are in this together. We're partners. We each bring a certain skill set to the table and a certain point of view, but at the end of the day, it's about producing great work together and getting to that point where you trust each other, talking in shorthand, you know each other both on a personal level, which allows for the work to be better. That level of trust, to me, looking back over the course of my career, is what has allowed great work to be born and put out into the world. And without that, the agency client relationship really can be, at times, unfortunately, a tenuous one, right? When there's missed expectations. So that trust is paramount in the foundation for anything that is successful between agency and client, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. It definitely is the strength that gets you through the hard times. Is that like mistakes, issues, errors are going to happen. We have a bunch of people operating things and people don't always make the right decisions or miss things, but that trust kind of gives you that foundation. I always talk about like trust is the foundation of every relationship. I actually named our agency Truvo Ads is a combination of Novo and trust combined. So it means new trust
Right.
is kind of the meaning of it.
So you
Because I completely agree with you. That's like to me the foundation of a good relationship at any whether that's personal or business is the has trust as the foundation.
100%. And it's funny, from an account perspective, creators don't fully grasp this initially, which is when things actually, or someone else inside the organization, when things actually break down, especially early on a big project, it's actually a really good thing. And the reason it's a really good thing is it allows for the opportunity for you to have a more human conversation with the other person, not about scope, not about budget, not about timelines or whatever it might be. Is you say, "Hey, this happened, right? This is why it happened. This is our perspective. This is how we're correcting it, whatever it might be." And then allows for like a much deeper conversation. And so when things break down, it really does, instead of seeing it as like a negative or like, oh my God, we got to fix this immediately. Of course you have to fix it, but it really allows for the opportunity to build that trust, because that is over time what you're going to fall back on, because things are going to be imperfect. They always will. It's a tough business. There's deadlines. There's a lot of moving parts. And so being able to really pick up the phone or have a text conversation and come from a place of understanding, that is huge. And unfortunately, a lot of times the only way you get there is when you need to pick up the phone and talk to them about something that didn't go as planned.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit more of like, what is your approach of handling those difficult conversations when something goes wrong?
Yeah.
A creative message went out wrong, the ad campaign went to the wrong people, the whatever the issue is, you got to go address it with a client, call them, get them on the phone, talk to them human to human
Right.
and address it. Like, what's your approach to that? Obviously, like that, I completely agree. Like, that strengthens the thread of trust is being able to have those hard conversations. But, like, how do you approach that? Is it an optimistic view of like how we're going to do things better? Like, what have you found is like the wrong way to deal with that and the right way to deal with a mistake?
It's a great question. The wrong way I can tell you for sure is coming in as like, we got this. No, it's really not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Kind of just basically just glossing over it, like saying and having a conversation. If you're not really having a conversation, you're basically just whitewashing the issue. That to me is by far the worst thing you could do. Hard stop. Best thing you can do, first thing you need to do is you got to come with a solution, right? Before you pick up the phone, you have to talk to your team. You have to get aligned internally on like what are the options to fix the issue that work for the agency and the client, and have those ready to go. And then then you request for some time. I get on the phone with them, and especially if it's early on in the relationship, and just ask them, we need that, or tell them actually, say, like, we're about to have a maybe not great conversation, but don't worry, we have some solutions, and then just lay out what happened in a very matter of fact way. not emotionally, not defensive. Just, hey, this happened. This is the decision that led to this. We have some solutions, but before I bring those to the table, what are your initial thoughts? How are you feeling? Is anything like this? Is there anything on your end that you might be able to fix or kind of bring to the table to kind of make this better? And then and then that usually making an open-ended conversation or an open-ended question for them once they know the specifics, I have found allows for that a better conversation, a much more flowing conversation where I get to listen, hopefully more than I talk, and then get to the point where we get to a solution that works for both parties.
Got it. Yeah, so you're really bringing them along and helping figure out what the solution is like pull them in, what's their perspective on it? How do we resolve this? And then have a two-way rather than it just a one way. Let me tell you what went wrong, what we're going to do, all one way, just, hammering them with
Yeah,
your
and even
perspective.
taking a step further, it's not just allowing them to be part of the conversation. You're actually asking them in a way which to fix. Can they fix it? Right?
Yeah,
Are they able to fix it with what they know with their inside their organization? Again, we're happy to come in with our outside perspective and our outside way of doing things, but can they fix it? And allowing them the space to think it through and then come to the table. And if they don't want to fix it, that's completely fine. But at least you're giving them the power of the decision, which they really appreciate in those moments.
absolutely. This next question kind of comes from like a lot of agencies really specialize. They're like, we're going to be the healthcare agency, right? And focus on the healthcare vertical. We're going to be in sports marketing. We're just going to focus on that. We're going to be in travel. We're just going to do travel. But based on your experience, like you've worked across a wide variety of large brands and like really big verticals, sports marketing, consumer goods, all of that. Those are really like different types of beasts to kind of handle.
Yeah.
How have you over the years like been able to kind of put on your different hats and focus to navigate between those different types of brands, those different verticals? Like, is there a common thread you see across all of them? And then, like, how do you deal with the nuance and differences?
Sure. So again, another great question. For me, uh, one, you got to be a quick study, right? But in order to be a quick study, you have to come to the table with knowledge that you have about sort of business in general. So I'm always reading, literally, I read a ton of things every single day. I listen to podcasts. I'm up to speed, so to speak, on sort of the world at large. And then when you kind of dive deep into a new client or a new industry, the commonality is actually there's more commonality than you'd think. And what I mean by that is if you want to call it a fan of the brand or a consumer, right? There's a core group of people that support a company, that support a brand. They get up every day and they make the decision to purchase that product for whatever reasons. That exists in every single industry. So the reason that we get hired as an agency is because that brand has already done extremely well with a core group of consumers, and they have a large enough revenues that they're ready to try to expand. That's just one example. The commonality, if you know that, is there is a core group of people that you have to get to understand, right? So if you go back to my Nike days on the agency side, they always talk about obsessing the consumer. To me, that was the best description of the mindset that you need to be successful as a brand marketer or an agency, account manager, which is you need to obsess their consumer. You need to understand their mindset, their motivations, essentially the why of why they choose your brand over someone else. And if you're once you start understanding that, you're able to start understanding the nuance beyond that with that specific to that industry, because every industry has its own language, its own conferences, its own fiscal year, its big moments, but those all exist in every single industry. So it really just comes from a sort of a curiosity standpoint and an education standpoint, and knowing that it takes a little bit of time, but once you get there, you'll start seeing that the core consumer or obsessing the consumer, that consumer acts the same generally speaking, across industries. They're there, they like your brand, and they will take the time to interact with your brand. They'll take time to talk about it. They'll take time to educate themselves to go out and purchase whatever it is they want to purchase. And that pretty much exists the same across industries.
Got it. And then, yeah, so it's really figuring out who those people are, why they obsess about it, and then how that relates to everything else that you do, all the downward flow of
Yeah.
ad campaigns, the timing, the strategy, that all lines up
All the
differently
things,
based
right?
on the
If you want to go back to your tech,
yeah.
right? You talk about computers. Computer people that upset, the consumer in the tech space, especially if you love love, they get really into the specs of the
Mhm.
power and the keyboard and the screen and all the little things and like that make them get them excited. Talk about sneakers, it's about colors, it's materials, right? It's cushioning, it's so the product benefits on each industry or each, category, they're there, they're just different. But that's what people love. It's like, here's the brand and they provide these product benefits for the thing that I like, and they consistently deliver that for me day in, day out.
Yep, absolutely. That was one of the big, principles out of Jeff Bezos. I read, like, the Bezos letters, and one of his biggest principles was, like, obsess about the consumer, and their whole that's, like, driven all of Amazon's decision. It's just, like, how do we obsess about the consumer, what they want, how they're using the platform, all of that, and then that guided all their decisions of what they created from there.
It's super smart. The problem is you see it all the time. There's drift. What winds up happening, and when things kind of get, I don't say wonky, but sort of, not as perfect as you want to, is the people that work inside the brand, especially as you go higher up inside the brand, tend to, at time, for some reason, kind of forget that. And that they think they're the consumer, right? So the people making the decisions about, especially on the creative, at times can, and it's not everywhere, but can forget that they're not the consumer. You have to always remind yourself that the person looking back in the mirror is probably not the person that you're trying to reach. And you have to keeping yourself in the mindset of the person that's purchasing the products, not you. And that over time, that gets hard, especially inside large organizations. And so when there is drift, that's where I've seen it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that happen a lot in the paid ad space because it's always, "Why am I not getting served the ads?" I'm like, "You're not even the target customer.
Right.
You shouldn't see the ads." Like, good targeting means you don't get the ad because we're targeting you're a 54-year-old male, we're targeting 18 to 34-year-old women who are, into shopping for this unique product, right?
Right.
It's like you're not the market, so you
Correct.
shouldn't get the ads. But I feel like there is always a dichotomy kind of, a tug or tension between you hear some people say brands should focus on like being true to themselves, their authentic selves. They shouldn't take in too much account of like customer feedback or decisioning. Like you should just stay on your mission and that's going to attract the right people. And then there's the flip side of like what you just said, like some brands, Nike, Amazon, those are like obsess about the customer and give them everything that they want based on what they're asking for. But I always find this, there's like, you hear the different perspective from different brands that kinda have there's like a tension, I feel like, between those 2. It's like, which way is the right way to go is probably brand dependent.
100%. And look, it's not perfect. I mean, if you look at Nike right now, they've drifted. They're not doing well in the last couple of years because they drifted away from their core consumer. It can happen to any brand, even the best in the world. Is you have to obsess it, and I don't know. Again, it's may just be human nature. Over time, there's a natural drift to kind of replicate who the consumer is with your own sort of own feelings about what's happening.
Yeah, that or one of the challenge for those, like, very, very large brands is they keep wanting to increase their market share and going out further away from their core audience. So it's like they have this core audience here that's really been their, their 20% that makes up 80% of, their business, but they keep trying to expand that audience. And as they expand, and that's where the drift happens. Is that what you see happening? Is that like they're trying to reach beyond who their core audience is because they want to grow?
No, I mean, yes and no. You need to, right? So growth is a business, right? You can't stay stagnant. So the way I have seen it play out, and if we use Nike's example, but other brands have done this as well, unfortunately, which is you have a core consumer of maybe 20% or 80 or 30% of your business is your core consumer. The ones basically are standing up your business day in, day out. Think that everyone else outside of the, call it 20%, the other 80% are the same as the 20% that built your business. They're not. So in order to expand beyond the 20%, you can't just take what you did for the 20% and replicate it outward. You have to start adjusting, based on the audiences that you want to reach or the next phase of growth. And that itself also has challenges, but it's kind of the opposite of what kind of you just mentioned, which is that if you replicate the same, you're gonna it's not gonna resonate the same with the other 80% that the 20% resonated, and that is a hard thing to do. And when you get it right, you see exponential growth, across consumer, demographics and audiences. And if you get it wrong, both don't grab additional share, and you tend to turn off the core audience to a degree. Depending on the elasticity of the brand, they'll stick with you for a much longer period of time. But you will start seeing like, whoa, I thought we stood for this, right? And then instead, now I'm seeing this all in the marketplace and these other ads. I don't see you that way. Like for Amazon, like I don't. That's not how I
Yeah.
envision you. And so you have to be really, really careful with that as well. Again, obsessing the consumer means obsessing all the consumers and all the different audiences, and not just the larger the brand, the more nuanced it gets as you get outside of the core. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but it's really nuanced, and I think that's where the challenge comes in. It's not easy to do, which is
Right.
also, and the last thing is, like, I see this over and over again in the marketplace right now, and it continues. It's really interesting. Direct to consumer brands, the ones that were born in the last 5 to 7 years, they're all Shopify brands or whatever, want to call them. They do really, really well with a one product or a core product, and they tend to grow pretty quickly. And there's a long list of companies that have done really well doing that. There comes to a point where, and a lot of them are right now, where they're stuck. They don't know what to do next. They have they have basically saturated their core consumer. They have a revenue that they want to grow with, but they don't know what to do with beyond the core group of people that they reach through the digital ads, in the way that they reach them, and the way they talk to them. And suddenly they're like, they see flatlining revenue and or revenue going down. You're seeing it. You see that a lot. And so I find that part interesting, well, because that's the opposite side of the coin, right? You have the, oh, well, we don't need to be Nike. We don't need to be Amazon. We're the small little direct consumer. We sell shirts, and we sell the best shirts in the world. Great. Well, then you just, for 5 years, you sold shirts to, 20% of your audience. And now those 20% have enough t-shirts. Now what are you going to do?
Right.
And that's where we're at.
Yeah. Where do you expand? Do you expand by trying to acquire a new audience, or do you expand by adding on additional product or service to sell to that same core audience? And that's probably where the strategy comes in of what makes sense for those individual brands.
Correct. Yep.
I see the other things that most of those brands really struggle with is that they actually don't build a brand. They have a widget or a product or a service, and they can sell that really well, and it solves a problem for a core audience, but they don't have a real brand that is, so they kind of have this commoditized product. And that's where I see is like a lot of brands, they'll go just heavy from, like, I look at everything obviously from a paid ads perspective, but they'll just go heavy of just focusing on the lowest funnel ad channels, your Meta ads, Google ads, retargeting, and they're like, we can make this work and we see the return, but they're not playing the long game of building the brand. And from a paid ads perspective, there's a lot of ways you can obviously build a brand, but brand is built off of a lot of different associations and connections. And it's really comes down to like, are you, for the same product, are you willing to pay a premium for this brand, so to speak, right? But I think a lot of it comes down to those individual D2C companies not focusing on building their brand assets and their long-term brand health, and just focusing on the lowest funnel. And then they get burnt out because they max out Meta ads and Google ads, and their CPAs go up and their return on ad spend goes down.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And that's exactly what I see, just not within the sort of, not looking at the dashboard, right? That is exactly what's happening. That's why building a business, that lives and grows over time is really difficult. You need to do all these things well all at the same time. We don't do one well, it kind of, at some point you hit a wall. And so what you're talking about makes sense to me from a ads perspective, right? A paid ads perspective, the cost per acquisition, and lifetime value starts going down. All these things start changing because suddenly people aren't buying as much, and you don't know what to do about it, and they don't feel anything about your brand. They just know that they're just flooded with ads. Like, buy this product. Oh, you didn't buy it this time? Here's 20% off, or here's a free thing. That run,
Yep,
that run,
just going to discounts. Yeah,
It runs out, right? That once you get into that game, there's not that many other tools you can do or things you can do to reinvigorate a brand. If you're suddenly people aren't buying, and then especially when you make them offer to percentage off and they're still not buying, you're kind of getting into trouble territory.
right. And that's why I always, business planning, mentorship approach is always that what it takes to go to 0 to 1 million is different than what it takes to go 1 to 10 and 10 to 100. Right. And so that comes down to like different strategies and different ways of growing your business, how you market, how you brand, what channels you're in, how do you appear to the customers, what products, services are you offering. So all of those kind of have to evolve as you hit those different milestones. I think to your point, they get to maybe 10 million and then they're kind of capped because they're not building that brand or expanding their audience or expanding their products or services.
100%. And on the agency side, if you want to tie it back there, it's similar to the agency. When agencies grow, in my experience, it's about every 20% or every 20 people, they have to change how they do business. That,
Mm,
and again, you're going to go from 0 to 100. That what I just said is equal, is true. But then you're going to grow beyond 100, that maybe that percentages change. Essentially, if you were to take an agency from 0 people to 100 people, it would have to basically be 3 to 4 different agencies to get to 100 to be operating at scale, to at scale. And that's where on the agency side, they have trouble during the growth periods because you can't, what got you here won't get you, where you need to go. And it's very hard to let
Yeah.
go. So it's kind of human nature as well on both sides if you want to tie it back to the agency world, but it's very similar in the sense that
Yeah, I think it relates really to all businesses, right? But yeah, what have you seen? Is that internal processes and systems that need to evolve and change, or is it also external offerings and services to clients? Like you have to expand as an agency grows to reform its agency and reshape it as you grow every 20 employees or hit different revenue marks. Yeah, is it changing internally, processes and systems and services, combination of both?
it's a combination of both, but it's more the first one, especially in the early growth. Because what winds up happening inside a smaller agency is you wear many hats, right? There's a lot of shorthand and things that aren't written down in a lot of ways. This is just how we do it, and the new people come on board, and you don't not hiring that many people, and so they suddenly kind of sort of understand. Okay, we talk informally on Slack, and we do more formal documents in SharePoint or whatever, and da da da. You can't do that when you start growing. You need to start writing everything down. You need to start onboarding people differently, and then you also need to start segmenting out people's experience based on, in other words, like, you can't wear as many hats. If you wore 5 hats when you're, 5 people, you're 20 people, you can wear 3 hats. By the time you get to 50 people, you can pretty much only wanna wear 1 hat, and everyone along the way needs to understand that and let go of certain responsibilities, and that's also hard because you're like, "Well, me wearing this many hats got us to where we are. I
Yep.
don't wanna let go." And you're like, "Well, you
Yep.
kinda need to, otherwise we're gonna get stuck, and then you're gonna get stuck, and et cetera, et cetera."
Yeah, you get bottlenecked and capped by either individual team leads or owners itself in terms of them trying to do too much and you can't grow beyond that. From an agency perspective, what do you see as kind of the agency marketing advertising industry? What do you think's gotten better over the last couple of years, last 5, 10 years that you've seen? And then what do you think's getting worse or being a bigger challenge for agencies?
That's a good, again, another good question. For me, it's really interesting. I don't think agencies get enough credit. Right? I think agencies in general are the most adaptable businesses, like, out there. If we go where the clients are go. So if you talk about the last 10 years inside the agency world, it's changed dramatically
Hmm.
on so many different levels. And especially in the last couple of years, I mean, the AI revolution hit agencies about 3 years ago, right? The recession in agencies hit 2 years ago. No one talks about that because I don't think there's enough, sort of employees inside agencies that affect an article that the Wall Street Journal would, cover. But it's happened and it's been happening, and the ones that are, people that work inside agencies have adapted to the new world that they're in, which is shrinking budgets, right? And I think to me that was the biggest challenge of the last couple of years was the fact that there's long established costs for what things cost, right? And how many people it takes to make something. Suddenly the budgets got smaller, but the delivery or the demands remain the same. And again, that happens in a lot of businesses, but when that happens, you're talking about people, you're talking about processes. And it's really, really difficult, for example, to make a broadcast television spot for half the cost it was the year before, right? It's a really difficult thing for an agency to have to pull off, but we do and did, and that isn't. And I don't think people appreciate how hard that is, right? So I think they've done really well at adapting. I think the thing that to me they're not doing as well, and it's a real challenge. And it probably goes to a larger conversation. Is agencies work better when there was a scarcity model of media. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is appointment television, whether it be, back in the day or whether it's which now you have the only thing that's appointment television is live sports. Agencies did great, especially ones that made television ads. They did great in those moments, right? That's how you got big budgets. You can reach the most amount of people. It's how brands internalize your success, how you did, right? And so the measurement wasn't the same. And so all that allowed for just brands to do really great work, and then it led to, okay, you have a Super Bowl ad and then all the awards and the awards and the awards. And so suddenly the industry started judging itself based on the ability to deliver these amazing ads based on a scarcity model. Obviously, in the last 10
Hmm.
years, that has changed dramatically. All we have is ad units. And if you
Yeah,
look at Meta's revenue, if it's last quarter and the amount of revenue they get from advertising, they're basically just making up ad units. There's no scarcity. There's literally all they have is what they've established is that they have an unlimited number of ads if they want them.
sure. Yep.
And every platform is the
100%.
same. Like there's no end in sight to the amount of ads that you can run, right? On the belief that your customers are out there if you just put enough ads out there. The industry is still judging itself on the Super Bowl ad,
Mm,
like saying we're only good because we're in the Super Bowl or we won a Cannes Lion or we did this. However, everything else on the financial side of things is the opposite. Is like you need to be in these platforms spending money in order to your core consumer. There's no awards for that. No one judged. There's very few people patting themselves on the back and saying we won this award for reaching this many people on Meta last quarter. And I mean, it's not. It happens inside those industry, like inside media buying companies. I'm sure there an agency. There's probably internal awards, but you don't see external validation. So there's external validation is an old school validation, operating in a new validation world mostly.
yeah, because you see that as like brands are still making decisions based off of that original validation of like, are you an award-winning agency for these services rather than adapting to this new fragmented media landscape we're in?
Both a little both, right? You have. It's interesting. The brands want the agency that won the awards, but when you get to the work, most of the work is not that. And so you need to do all
Right.
the other things
Yeah.
really, really well. And that's where you have the tension inside the agency world, right?
Yep. Yeah, because I see it as a huge challenge for most brands is there's, like you said, there's more supply and inventory to reach audiences in unique moments than ever
Ever
before. And
before.
it is essentially unlimited.
Unlimited.
And like a lot of clients bring up like frequency and how much your reach should be and all these things. And at the end of the day, people get 5,000 to 10,000 ads per day on average across all these different media environments. And so to think that your 6 or 10 or old frequency models is going to work in a new media, fragmented media landscape is kind of absurd if you think about it. Is it that ad frequency is a drop in the bucket and there's so much competition is that now it's no longer you're competing against, I think, your just adjacent competitor, but you're competing against every other brand, every platform for consumers' attention. And I think that's the real commodity now is like that everybody's after is like consumers' attention
100%.
that you have to compete for.
100%. And I mean, you said it really well. That's why kind of the scarcity model worked better for the business. It
Mhm.
really did. It allowed for really, really stronger decision making about what made it on air, what was an ad, what was worthy of your time, energy. And now you have the opposite, where this belief that, if, to your point, if you just make it and put it out in the world, people will buy your product. Fortunately, unfortunately, a good amount of data backs that up to a point, right? But there is a saturation point, and there is a uh, point where the frequency, like you're not capturing people's attention after a certain amount of time, and the platforms are not being, maybe they're not saying it out loud, but not being 100% honest that like we will literally keep making ad units if you keep giving us ad dollars. It doesn't mean it's effective. It just means we're going to give them to you. Unlike a sporting event, if I'm watching the NBA playoffs right now at home. There's only so many ad units. They're not going to triple those ad units inside the game because they'll ruin the product. That is a better model than the other one, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's turns off consumers. They try to keep being more sneaky in how they insert ads
Oh my
in. Like
god,
we see it all the
all
time
the
in
time.
ad comments where consumers are, people are like, well, I don't follow this. How did I get this in my feed? They don't recognize it's even an ad, which is kind of crazy. But I think that what's interesting about it is that you've gone to from a media perspective, media buying perspective of where I was trained with like a kind of more, I'll call them, traditional media buyers buying linear and radio. And what I noticed with them is they had very much more of this kind of bulldog approach with those vendors is that we're going to keep an eye on the TV, the radio vendors, make sure we get make goods, make sure we get the right spots in the inventory. And now the modern media buyers just like buy whatever supply you can, listen to however Meta and Google tell you to buy, and we're just going to trust the measurement. We're going to allow Meta and Google to basically grade their own homework from an attribution
Right.
standpoint.
Everything. Yeah.
And it just keeps fueling the whole system. And I think going back to the earlier point about direct to consumer brands is they get trapped in that mindset of just looking at the one-to-one approach of attribution within these different ad channels. And they don't take a higher look up and realize that we're spending, you know, $2 more, $4 more because Meta keeps saying that you can keep scaling up your budget, but we're not getting back the return from a macro view of our revenue. And I think that's happening to direct to consumer brands, but I think it's also happened to large enterprise brands
It's happened to
because they keep
everyone.
just fueling the supply that you're talking about because there is no scarcity, there's no control over these media publishers that are really just they're sales organizations. Their goal is to maximize the sales of their inventory.
100%. That's exactly what is happening as far as I can tell. And it's interesting. I'm waiting for sort of the breakdown, right? So again, every quarter Meta announces earnings. Ad revenue keeps going up by a lot, right?
Yeah. They just surpassed Google Ads. I think for the first time they surpassed Google Ads last
Yeah, it
quarter.
was like, and I don't know, and this could be wrong. I know we're on a podcast. I think it was $60 billion, but that could be a completely wrong number. But it's a really large number, but it keeps going up. I keep thinking to myself, there has to be a point like everything else where it stops and goes in the other direction because there's a lack of return because they're literally just making more ad units. And their argument is, oh, we have a global audience, we can reach people all over. Yeah, that, in theory, that is true, but in everything, there's a point where you have to, where it stops. And so I'm watching it each quarter to see, okay, is this the quarter where it's where the ad revenue goes down for Meta, right, and then starts going in the other direction, and the other platforms. It will happen. I just can't tell you when it'll happen.
That's what I find so interesting, especially about the Meta environment. When I try to talk to other media buyers that don't have much experience buying either traditional or just what I call open internet ads, your connected TV, display, audio, all of those. But we buy both. And so we see the process of buying both. And what's different about Meta and Google is that they control the supply and the demand. So they can always push you more supply as long as you have demand because they control both sides of the equation versus in traditional and open internet ad inventory, you have separation between the buy side platform and the sell side, the publishers, right? And so there's separation, there's differentiation, and you can control that ad ecosystem better versus Meta and Google own the entire ad ecosystem. It's the equivalent of you going to buy a house and the person selling you the house or the agent selling you the house is also representing you as the buyer. And their goal is just to sell you the highest priced house and the most
Correct.
houses,
And I keep
right?
waiting.
And you're like, I'm just going to listen to you as my buyer agent.
Right. I keep waiting for people to. I keep waiting for what you just said to become a reality. It's not, and I feel like sometimes I'm the one who's like, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me.
Yeah.
But then,
I think the challenge for brands, from my experience of being in a lot of rooms of media planning and focusing, is that we still have to follow where people are spending time. And people spend so much time on Facebook and Instagram just from a consumer standpoint is that you have a huge gap in your attention and like reaching specific customers if you're not on those ad channels. And that's what just keeps fueling it is you're kind of trapped in a way of being forced to allocate budget into these specific ad channels. But that's why we really try to have a balanced media plan of open internet and what I call walled gardens, all the social media platforms because the social platforms really have so much control over the supply. Like you said, they just keep fueling more supply, and it's hard to see the incremental impact of each ad unit.
and you only see it when brands in mass, whether it be DTC brands or legacy brands, start pulling back and being like, in a way, this is enough money, there's enough budget you're going to get. We kind of don't believe in you anymore. We're going to start allocating budget elsewhere. And again, it's going to happen. I just don't know if it's going to happen this quarter or the next quarter, but nothing grows exponentially up and to the right. And so there will be a period of time where this stops and we either flatline or go down. And it's just, those are just
Yeah.
facts. We'll see what happens.
I guess we just don't know what that peak is.
Yeah. If I was smart enough to know that, I wouldn't, maybe I
Yeah.
wouldn't be in this industry. No, I love this industry.
Yeah. Maybe trading. Last question for you. If you give your younger self one piece of advice when you're kind of starting out in your career, what would that be?
Don't be afraid to be wrong. Wrong means wrong with ideas, wrong with, how you approach things. It's okay to be the person in the room who doesn't know it, that asks the questions, doesn't know what they're doing in the beginning, as long as you're smart and you put in the work and you earn your seat at the table. But don't be afraid of being sort of seen negatively initially. that no one remembers. People, very rarely is the mistake anything what you thought it was, to really just really go for it, right? I think my biggest wins in the latter part of my career was me pushing clients and ideas that I wouldn't have previously pushed when I was younger, knowing that even if they say no, it was absolutely worth taking that swing. And then if it does get made, that's even better. That makes me that much prouder of something that's out in the world, because it does live for a long time. At least the ads that I've made that really mean something to me. Even ones from like 4 or 5 years ago, like I still love them. And that wouldn't be that way if I didn't take a big swing. I was afraid to
Yep.
be wrong.
Yeah, you never know if unless you take that big swing.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. I completely agree with that, and, like, I was lucky enough, I had some mentors early in my career that forced me when I was very young to sit at the table and, like, always speak up and, like, bring
smart.
something to the table. Always add to the conversation, never just be the person that's just sitting at the table quiet, not adding anything.
Right.
Because it's like, what's the point? Why are you even there? And, I think you get much more growth, whether you learn what was wrong or you say something that maybe other people weren't even thinking of, and then you added some value, and you don't know unless you take the swing.
100%. Yeah, and that to me, I
Yeah.
think, is the advice I'd give myself or anyone starting out, which is, and what you just said as well. It's like, make yourself known, and if you're wrong, sit with that discomfort a minute, understand why, and improve and grow from there. And that's where you grow and have the best success over time.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adam.
Absolutely, it was fun. Thanks for having me.